Right, we're going live now. Right, we're going live now. Take a bit of intro music, David. Hi, Stephen.
Play Scotland the Brave.
Play Scotland the Brave. For over 90 million songs on demand, say try Amazon Music Unlimited. Here's Scotland the Brave by Pipes and Drums and Regimental Band of the Royal Highland Fusiliers on Amazon Music.
Hi, Margaret. Brilliant. Welcome aboard, folks, to the Two Davies show, chat show. And today we're going to be talking about the democratic deficit and how the Unionists are trying to delegitimise democracy in Scotland, and culminating today in a wazzock by the name of Professor Michael Keatons, who was an absolute gas, but we'll get to that. Remember, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button if you like what we do. That all helps us open up more facilities on YouTube. Okay, right, we have a couple of minutes to get a few more of these on board. Then we go watching 10 now. So, David, you and I have been looking on in horror for the last couple of years. For the 2016 election to now, on how the Unionists have been trying to delegitimise any form of a democratic decision making in Scotland. 2016, SNP won majority, and they, in their manifesto, they said they'd go for another independence referendum if there was a material change in circumstance like Brexit. There was a material circumstance, Brexit. Nicola Sturgeon goes to Theresa May, asks for the Section 30 order. Tell, now is not the time, because they can't say no, otherwise that wrecks the idea that this is a voluntary union. And so Nicola comes back, Nicola says, all right, now's not the time. Let's see how this Brexit shit unfolds. Then the Tories in 2017 tell us now is not the time to come back in 5 years. You've got to give Brexit a chance to work. Fast forward to 2021, an overwhelming majority for pro-independence MSPs in the Parliament, and a coalition, albeit, but both parties ran on a distinct manifesto of holding an independence referendum in the term of this Parliament. They won a majority. Westminster then tells them, nah, no good enough. You didn't get 50% plus one of the popular vote between the two independence parties. Unionist parties, of which there were three, have merited the popular vote. So, democracy denied again, but Nicola Sturgeon's nowhere at this time. She's digging in. She says, no, I've won a mandate to hold a referendum. So we're going to test it in court, whether I can hold one or no. In the meantime, just to go through a wee bit of narrative here, we've been told, no, you can't have a referendum, so Plan C, because Plan A is to have a referendum with a Section 30 agreement, Plan B is to have one without a Section 30 agreement, if the Supreme Court approves, and Plan C is a plebiscite election, and a first-past-the-post system. Now, we all remember Thatcher back in the day, making it clear to Mr. Salmond in the Parliament that if the Scots wanted independence, then they should vote a majority of pro-independence MPs to that Parliament. Simple as that, just vote a majority of pro-independence MPs to that Parliament. Fast forward to now, with our own Plan C, and we're told that a pro-independence majority of MPs and a pro-independence majority of votes won't cut it. It's not a democratic mandate. So basically we're being told there is no democratic route to independence. Of course, we're being gaslighted, but that's beside the point. When do you make it? Oh, I forgot about also on the road to delegitimising democracy in Scotland, we've had the BBC tell us that the human rights articles on the right to self-determination don't apply to Scotland because we live in a modern, developed democracy. And just today, when Professor Michael Keaton's telling us there's no such thing as a democratic mandate, and that there is no written constitution either, and that that non-existent document is reserved. That's the story of delegitimising democracy here in Scotland. What's your take on it, David?
Well, point one is that we have the claim of right. Point two is the United Nations are very clear on self-determination, that a group of people in a distinct nationhood are entitled to break away from another state or a union or whatever, right? Also, we've got the Justice Minister back at the time that said it would be inconceivable for people within a union not to be able to break away. What he was talking about Britain leaving the EU, but also that accounts for Scotland leaving the United Kingdom. So in actual fact, it's like we've got all our ducks in a row. All we need to do is take independence. We're an independent state, all bar the bloody shouting, and that's all it is at the moment. And as far as I'm concerned, well, if the Supreme Court come back with a definite no, which I'm not sure that they can. They cannot usurp Scottish law, but we do have to get some chief advocate to sign off on the bill because that's important. We need there is a point that if the bill hasn't been produced, then how can that possibly be judged on by the Supreme Court? The thing that put the cat amongst the pigeons, I'm sorry to say, was another Michael Keatings, who actually brought a case regarding Scotland's legality of running a referendum without a Section 30 or whatever, right? And that was, in my mind at the time, and now it was maybe a wrong move to make because it set up a precedent where they refused it, that was thrown out and it shouldn't have been run. But it happened, so yeah, that's my take on it. How's about that? Do you want to talk a wee bit about what this Professor Michael Keatings was saying on the BBC? Because I'm sure many people haven't heard it, and it would be rather nice just to sort of like go through that a little bit. And then we can talk about another constitutional expert.
We can talk about another couple, actually, but Professor Keatings was brought on to, Emeritus Professor Keatings of Aberdeen University was brought on to the BBC at lunchtime today because Nicola Sturgeon had made her pitch in the second Building Scotland the Nation a speech to paper to the people, making it clear that a new Scotland, independent Scotland, would be built solidly on true democratic principles. And she went on to say that the SNP and the Green government has a democratic mandate. Now, this guy, Professor Keatings, was brought on to talk about what that democratic mandate, and he was asked if the Scottish Government had a democratic mandate, and he says there's no such thing as a democratic mandate. That was his pitch. He says it's only what's accepted by the higher body, meaning Westminster. You know, he says it's a mute subject. But you and I know, we had a really good modern history department at our school, modern studies, and it was explained to me quite simple how the system works. The democratic system works very simply. You form a party, you stand candidates in wards, own a manifesto produced by the collective, and you take that to the population. The party that wins with their manifesto has the biggest share of the vote, has the biggest amount of seats, has a democratic mandate from the people to execute that manifesto. It's no rocket science, but yet here we have a professor of political sciences, emeritus professor, should I say, of political sciences at Aberdeen University telling us there's no such thing as a democratic mandate, which means that all our modern studies departments right across Scotland right now are teaching our children a lie. It also means that he, as a professor of political sciences, has been teaching his students a lie when it comes to the basic principle of the way our democracy works. So this guy's claim that there's no such thing as a democratic mandate had Davies nearly crashed the car. Right. But the lunatic then went on to talk about Catalonia as if Catalonia was in the same situation as Scotland. Catalonia threw all in after the Franco Wars, after the Franco carry-on in the Spanish Civil War. Catalonia threw all in and signed up to a solitary state. The UK is constructed by treaties. And to quote Geoffrey Cox, Attorney General down that road, no country can be held in a treaty against its will. And of course, we can all use our search engine to get the definition of the UK. The United Nations sees the UK as a state made up of separate entities, different countries. You know, they're trying to tell us this is a unitary state when it's no. But what's really interesting is the gaslighting that's going on. As I say, so far, the Human Rights Act doesn't apply to us. We're a subspecies. So far, there's no such thing as a democratic mandate. So far, our democracy and we're second-class citizens. And the latest one is, even if you've got a democratic mandate, so what? It doesn't exist if the other partner in this trade agreement stroke union of nations doesn't recognise that you've got a democratic mandate. Wow.
Well, as far as this professor emeritus, which just means he's bloody retired, is concerned, the chap has spent a few years now developing a narrative, a unionist narrative. And he's written books, The Fractured Union, what is it? I'll see if I can get it.
Yeah, I'm going to call it right now. I think I found the single biggest productivity hack.
It's basically The Fractured Union. And he's been talking about ways that they can manage to circumvent that, the various different legal ways they can manage to get it whereby Scotland wouldn't be able to break away from the United Kingdom. And you've just got to see it. He's a unionist bazooka. That's what he is. Some of the stuff he's saying, I mean, there's definitely, he bases an awful lot of his arguments on Catalonia. And Catalonia, as David has just said, is part of Spain, and Spain is an indivisible country with regard to their own written constitution, right? England has no written constitution. It has conventions and laws that make up a sort of a wind-based constitution, right? So therefore, a constitution cannot be reserved because no constitution for Britain, as he points out on that he actually said the words, the constitution for Britain doesn't exist, right? He's right, it doesn't exist. However, he does say it's reserved.
That's what I mean about gaslighting, David.
Yeah.
I mean, to any logical thinking human being, something that doesn't exist can be reserved.
Yeah, correct.
So this is what we're talking about, gaslighting. Absolute gaslighting. I mean, here we have a so-called emeritus professor of political sciences telling us that something that doesn't exist can be reserved by somebody who does exist. So, Make up anything you want, and then just say I've reserved it. You
Right.
know?
The post that I did this morning was on the article by Professor Mark Weller. I do recommend everybody reads, not my blurb, but just reads the article from Mark Weller. He holds the chair of international law and international constitutional studies in the University of Cambridge. He was the United Nations constitutional expert. And basically what he said that Scotland doesn't require Section 30 or any of that, any permission whatsoever to run a legal referendum under UN law, under international law. They just get ahead and do it. And any of the stupid statements like now's not the time or the once in a generation nonsense doesn't count for anything whatsoever. So,
if we look at the debate between Tom Devine, Sir Tom Devine and Professor Karen Martins at the School of World Governance, Oxford, they seem to put a wee bit more weight on convention for some reason, but maybe because he was brought up under English law and doesn't understand Scotland's constitutional conventions, if you like, or constitutional conventions.
Yeah.
And this was backed up with the High Court before we had the Supreme Court. And who was it? You remember this one, David? Lord can't remember. What's his name? 1953. What was the famous case in 53? It was in the bloody post boxes. You know.
It was regarding the treaty and the fact that no changes could actually be made to it.
No, that wasn't it. It was what was his name? Lord. Began with C, I think. Anyway, he took on.
Was it Colquhoun?
No, it wasn't Lord Colquhoun. I can't remember who it was. Anyway, he took on the English Lord Advocate in the High Court, and the High Court rule was that a parliamentary sovereignty was a purely English construct, and it had no bearing on Scotland or in Scots law. Christ, I've read this case that many times; it's not true. And Arla, you're right. The thing that worries us all is the way that the UK ignored the UN ruling on the Chagos Islands. And they get Diego Garcia. You're absolutely right. Westminster even got ordered by the UK Supreme Court to return the Chagos Islands and Diego Garcia back to the people of the Chagos Islands. And they ignored the Supreme Court as well.
What did they do?
The difference is they're a tiny wee amount of people, and the world has generally ignored them. And the way they get ruined it was they rented the place out to America, so they're going to have to go the whole same thing again, and the United Nations, and then the US Supreme Court. So they were just kicking the ball down the line. The difference with us is we're already internationally recognised as a country within a union, because that's the way it's seen by the United Nations. So that's the important part. I don't think that Westminster would get to treat us the way they treated the Chagos or the Diego Garcia, Chagos Islands and Diego Garcia. They just wouldn't get away with that.
Yeah, but if they thought they could get away with it, they would.
Oh, listen, they're going to try and ignore any mandate. We're going to rely on the international community doing what the international community does in these circumstances, and that has come in and recognised the outcome of the plebiscite election or referendum. And we already know that the EU 27 will recognise us, and we know that Nordic countries will recognise us. Russia will recognise us out of spite. Will America recognise us? If we get it done before Biden's after throwing aye, and then they all start dropping like dominoes.
Yeah, well, but what was I going to say? That the thing about recognition, that this is important. We should now be, if you consider my words, that Scotland's already an independent nation, all bar the shouting, right? So what we should be doing now is looking beyond the line of independence and what's actually going to happen then. And what David's saying is the recognition by other countries becomes the name of the game. It's not just the case of the Scottish people putting an X or a mark on a box that says yes. It's that next stage, which is hugely important, right? And it's the fact that you get initially maybe 2-3 nations that go, yeah, we recognise the independent nation of Scotland, right? And then another one comes in, and another one comes in. And by the time you've got a few dozen countries that recognise it.
Thank you, Margaret. Lord Cooper versus the Lord Advocate.
Yeah. Then you can say, yes, we're an independent nation. And our UK government is then in a situation when they cannot possibly ignore anything that's going on if they were going to ignore our vote. So that's the important thing. So start thinking beyond that, and also with the greatest of respect to people that are shouting UDI and what's the other one, the Salvo and all the rest of it, right? Salvo would tie us up in international court for the next 2 decades, right? Is that when you want independence? No. I want it next week if I can get it. But anyway, there you go. But UDI, that would cause a lot of countries just to go, no, we're not recognising. Just like Kosovo. Kosovo's still not recognised by apart from just a small handful of countries. So what we need to do is we've got to tick all the boxes, do it the proper way. We've got to do it the democratic way. But there is going to come a time when somebody somewhere is going to go, you're having a referendum? That's highly illegal. Who's it illegal to? Well, it's illegal to the Justice of England. And if you consider that America broke the law to become an independent country because they were doing what the English judicial system said was against the law, and there they are. They're a nation in their own stance and all the rest of it. After all that, don't worry about it.
I need to answer this one for James Carpenter. The simple reality is that we're subject to the UK constitutional arrangement, and the Scotland Act is quite clear that issues relating to the Union are reserved to Westminster. It was very cleverly worded, that, James, because reserved to Westminster would imply that there was something for them to reserve. But we've already spoke about it. There is no constitution, so it can't be reserved. And what David's talking about with America is absolutely correct. What the Westminster Parliament is saying is our independence would break English law and English constitutional arrangements. English law and English constitutional arrangements, as was stated by Lord Cooper versus the Lord Advocate in the High Court in 1953, has no bearing in Scots law or on Scots constitutional arrangements. That's another one of these gaslighting arguments we're getting for these idiots doing that road who want to deny democracy. Contract law is quite clear. Can't you put a contract on the table? It doesn't fucking exist. A constitution is a contract between its people and a government and its people. If there isn't a contract that can be produced, then the constitution doesn't exist. And that is the point that this Martin Keating's was making today, actually. That there isn't a constitution, but it was reserved. Exactly what you're saying there, the new James. Think it through logically. How can something that doesn't exist be reserved? You're being gaslighted, James. And that's what this professor doing at Cambridge University was pointing out. David, what was the professor's name again?
Michael Keatings.
No, the one at Cambridge University that says Michael Keatings is talking about.
Mark Weller.
Mark Weller. And Karen Martin puts a wee bit of weight behind English conventions as well, but they don't actually apply. And there's nothing in the treaty itself that says that either partner can withdraw. In fact, there's even a law and a mechanism for it. It's just been hidden from us. All right, and the mechanism is to have a plebiscite election, vote in a majority of MPs, as was quoted by Margaret Thatcher, who were pro-independence, recall the Scottish Grand Committee, and tell Westminster you're withdrawn. Simple as that. The procedure's already there to do it.
The procedure's also there.
You're saying, there isn't listen, James is saying there is a constitution that's no codified. Well, I'll tell you what, James. Use your search engine, pal, and put the constitution, the uncodified constitution, in the comments for me, please, to read.
Correct. Yeah.
Keep hearing this pie in the sky crap about a constitution. There's a bunch of gentlemen's agreements and court cases that were run and set precedents. That's what David means about a winner-takes-all constitution that doesn't exist. But there isn't a codified constitution, as you pointed out, so there isn't a contract between the government and its people. And we've seen that in Westminster over the last few years. 2012 was a cracker when the UK government absolved itself of the English government, under evil, absolved itself of its duty of care to the people of England own health care. Westminster's not responsible for the health care of the people in England anymore.
Yeah.
And they've done the same again with social care. Yet they're going to up taxes, as you know, to pay for social care. So this idea that the constitution exists, it's just no codified, is a lot of fish. There is nothing that can be put on the table. But as I say, you're welcome to use your search engine. Show me this uncodified constitution we're talking about. Put it on the table. Because what Professor Keating's was saying the day was, they're just a bunch of conventions. Loosely held conventions. And they're all passed at Westminster, or they're all enacted at Westminster, and they're all enacted under something called English law. Because there is nothing. There is no UK law. But if you can put that uncodified constitution on the table, James Carpenter, I'll be really interested to read it.
Right, yeah, just to maybe add to that, it's what Professor Michael Keating said at the very, very end was that therefore it is a political decision. And what they're saying, what he was saying was that they could bat it about for the next so many years, right? Now, as far as I'm concerned, that's the true mark of a dictatorship. They'll try and bat things into the long grass all the time, right? And the best way to deal with a dictatorship, if you do look at history, is to ignore it. And when they've managed to close all the doors, just bloody do it anyway. Because what will happen is that you'll get the situation that lots of countries have had, where all the doors have been closed, and they've done it anyway, and now they're independent, right? And a plebiscite election is a perfectly reasonable, perfectly respectable way of gaining independence. In fact, Southern Ireland, didn't they do it that way?
Yes.
It was a plebiscite election, yeah, and you know, so many countries, the normal, usual way of gaining independence tends to be not through a referendum, but through a plebiscite, where they say we're going to run the election based on this one issue, independence for our country and our people, right? So we're getting to a stage now where it's now looking like it's going to be a plebiscite election that decides the whole thing. And as far as I'm concerned, it really doesn't matter how we drag Scotland across the independence line. Providing it's done in a democratic method, then that's okay. That's good. That's good for what comes after, which is the recognition by other countries that Scotland is an independent nation.
Yep.
I'll shut up.
No, you're right, David. There has got to be a plebiscite election. And it is the normal procedure, because the way the empire was set up was that the countries that left the empire were actually just self-governing, and were just the empire was just sourcing the taxes off it, you know. So they just ran their elections on the idea of independence. I mean, look at Malta, tiny wee Malta. All the things that have been said to us was said to tiny wee Malta. Malta flourishing, you know. No enough water, no enough food, no nothing. You wouldn't be able to feed yourself, wouldn't be able to electricity, you wouldn't be able to clothe yourself. Fuck off, we're going to do it anyway. And as it turns out, it was all lies. Yeah. The UK government was taking more in revenues from Malta than what Malta was getting back, and that's why Malta was poor. And it's the exact same situation we face here.
And we had exactly the same situation with Singapore. Singapore were told, oh, you couldn't possibly. Oh, no, never
Sorry,
happened.
hold on, James. Scottish law, of course, pertains to Scotland and not the UK. That's why we're stuck. You really don't know very much, do you, Mr. Carpenter?
Yeah,
Scottish law
not
is English law, and there is no UK law, so we aren't stuck. Yeah. Any bill passed under Scots law for the Scottish Parliament, whether that be our MPs in the Scottish Grand Committee, as was done by Robin Cook, reaffirming the claim of right, or whether it's done by the Scottish Parliament. Now, Dorothy Bain might not have been sure on whether this was the right thing to do, but it looks like the Westminster Parliament could well force her to sign it. And if she does, then, because the Supreme Court might say this is, like the Court of Session said to Martin Keating's, this is a hypothetical situation, come back when the bill's been passed. The Supreme Court might do the same thing, but if it passes into Scots law, it's law. And the only thing the Supreme Court would be able to do then is judge on whether it was written competently under Scots law. Whereas at this point in time, it's a hypothetical question, and that leaves a wee wider scope for judgment. I'd much rather Dorothy Bain had signed it. But Westminster's argument at the moment is that the Supreme Court should throw it out because it's hypothetical, because the bill's not been signed. Might force Dorothy Bain to sign it, and once she signs it, it's under Scots law, then the judgment for the Supreme Court could happen.
What this
Scotland Act is an abomination. It's a bastardised piece of bad legislation drawn up by the Labour Party in 1998, and it is one of the worst pieces of legislation that was ever enacted. But what's interesting about it, Mr. Carpenter, is that the Scottish Parliament, as well as the UK Parliament, can make changes to the 1998 Scotland Act. But it's a really poorly written piece of legislation, and it was another con like the Treaty of Union, because we voted for devolved Parliament, Home Rule, and they decided what Home Rule was.
One further thing on that about the Supreme Court, that Professor Michael Keating, what he did finally say was that if the Supreme Court did rule that the bill was legal, they would make it conditional that a referendum has no effect. So therefore, what he's saying is they would add a proviso onto that.
But that brings you to the point where he comes to the end by saying it's a political decision whether to respect it or not. And that political decision whether to respect it or not will not be made in Westminster. That political decision will be made in the international community. And that's why Nicola Sturgeon has been striding across the planet like a giant, mustering support, so that when this plebiscite election or a referendum take place, then the international community will come in and recognise Scotland. Ted Boy, I do know that the tree's been trashed hundreds of times. I have a copy of a nice wee book for Jenny Ellis at Scottish Random History, which actually lists the amount of times it's been broken. It even tells us at one point that while Ireland was also part of the UK Union, that they started dropping the name Britain and British when writing trade deals and started replacing it with England and English. So a lot of the international trade deals out there don't actually apply to Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. Because they were starting to remove Great Britain and British and replacing it with England and English. So the treaty has been trashed 1,000 times. You're right enough, Ted Boy.
Right, that says we've run our half hour, and I'm very, very mindful that we don't go over that by very much.
Hold on, wait a minute. We're getting desperate here for James Carpenter. What he's now saying is the United Nations, the EU and the United Nations will simply say we voted to remain under the UK constitutional arrangement as recently as 2014. So what? Democracy is a living, breathing thing. And one of the things about the EU is it is a democracy. And all the countries in the EU is a democracy. In fact, the reason we have devolution is because the European Commission demanded that the UK gave Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland devolved parliaments, because the European Commission looked at the UK and said, that's not a proper democracy. And the botch up that they put in place to try and keep everything centralised. So The idea that the United Nations or the EU say, now you had a referendum 7 years ago or 8 years ago is a lot of bollocks, James. But more importantly, the EU is a signatory to the Good Friday Agreement. For the EU's point of view, and for America's point of view, if Northern Ireland can have a vote every 7 years on their constitutional arrangement if they want it, then Scotland should be able to too. Some of the arguments you're making, James, are brilliant. Thanks very much. You line them up, my son, and I'll note them down for you.
Right, come on. That's a half an hour up. So
not a half an hour up already.
Yeah. So it's been I've thoroughly enjoyed that, and I do hope everybody gets the point that we are strong enough to actually just go right through it anyway. It doesn't matter what happens. Scotland is an independent nation, all bar the shouting. So I'll leave you to do the wind-up, David.
Aye, thanks again for joining us. I want to thank James for coming on, especially for making the points that he's made, because it allows us to discuss them, James. So thank you very much. You were lining them up for the UK point of view, and I was telling you the point of view. And you're grasping at straws until an overwhelming majority of Scots are clearly shown to want a referendum. We are well short of that, sadly. James will know. But thanks, James. You were brilliant today in the comments. And that English boy, the boy for London's been good in the comments as well. It's been something to bounce the subject we're talking about back and forward between the audience. That's brilliant. Thank you, James. Please come back again. Now, guys, we need to round this up. It's Davies' day off, and Davy wants a pint. So, Davy's going to get a pint. So I hope you enjoyed today's chat show, folks, and I hope you found it entertaining. Thanks very much for your comments. They've all been interesting. And we'll be back to do it all again next week, unless something daft like this Professor Michael Keaton's comes up, and we can batter right. And no, I do mean that sincerely, James. Please come back. You were brilliant in the comments today.
Just one thing I want to add, right? If you're on a YouTube channel right now, if you haven't before, please subscribe and hit the like button. All right. So it's something we keep forgetting to say each time we do this. So please subscribe to the channel, because we're trying to get the numbers up, and we're trying to make the YouTube as being a place where people can come to and get useful facts, figures, all the rest of it, and chit chat like this. Okay, sorry, David, carry on.
Right, David's right. Please subscribe. Press the like button. These are all important things. Facebook, YouTube, keep all these stats. All right. Now I'll see you on tomorrow morning. For the final roundup of the news review of the crap that's happening today. Okay, we'll get to see what we're back doing. Tomorrow could be a big day in the race for the Prime Minister, because we'll be down to two, I think, and it could be a wee that they two come to an arrangement with each other in order for one of them to progress into the Prime Minister's office. So we'll be back tomorrow, folks, and thanks very much for joining us. Right, how the hell do I get out of here? Right, I'll need to get back to that. Right, cheers.